Welcome to the I Am an Entrepreneur Digital Summit in association with FNB and these partners.
Ready?
This forgetting to turn really becomes a key differentiator between yourself and your competitors. Those that real deep fake is also
few minutes in the economy. So we expect inflation to remain relatively muted. Our forecast
Thank you for joining us at the I'm an Entrepreneur Digital Summit in association with FNB and these partners.
We can help you pay staff without using cash. Send money by e-wallet or pay using EFT payments with the FNB app or online banking for business. FNB, how can we help you?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final installment of the I'm an Entrepreneur Digital Summit 2020. Wow, has this year not just flown by, right? Here we are already in the middle of November. We had to deal with so much this particular year. We had to move from our physical events to this digital platform, and I'm so happy so many of you could join us for the balance of the year. Like I say, this is the final one for the year, and who knows, maybe the final one in this kind of format. I think we've all had our fair share of Zoom. I was talking to my team a little bit earlier on, and we're just talking about, okay, what happens in 2021? And then my team said, but look, Andile, I think we all just need to take stock of 2020. And that is how we have styled today's session. Today, we are going to take stock of the year that was, and we're going to look forward to 2021 because it has been a tough year, emotionally, physically, and of course, as far as our businesses have been affected so negatively about what's been happening. But you're in the right place for that kind of right inspiration, right information. From now until midday, we are going to be talking about how to take stock and how to look forward to 2021. Now, we're not doing that just as a kind of a pie in the sky thing. We brought on some really, really top experts that I'll be introducing to you in a moment. A couple of rules. First of all, our giveaway. He's on the podium today. He's going to be talking to us a little bit later on. His name is Musa Kalenga. He's written this book, Ladders and Trampolines, and it's entitled Anecdotes, Observations from a Contemporary Young African Marketer. This book is up for grabs for today. The most active participant of our session for today will be receiving Musa Kalenga's book. So make sure you are participating, you are throwing in the questions, whether you're on the data free line or you're sending us WhatsApps, or you are here with us on Zoom, send us some questions and we will make sure you get a copy of this particular book. Now, another important thing we're going to be doing for the rest of today is I would like a lot of interaction from all of you guys. So in the Q&A platform and in the chat, let me know, where are you, where are you from, where are you joining us this morning? Let me make sure we can still see you. If you're on WhatsApp, on the free stream, our WhatsApp number, you know it, 078-3500-768. It's right there on your screen, 078-3500-768. WhatsApp us, let us know where you're dialing from so that we can make sure that we all have the interactivity that we've got today. And already I'm getting some stuff coming through. Miso Ntlangulela. Miso Ntlangulela. I must pronounce this correctly. He is from KwaZulu-Natal and he's joining us from KZN. You're most welcome, Miso. Paul Petros from Joburg, also coming through here on the Zoom, joining us this morning. Paul, you're also most welcome, my brother. And we promise to be having a great show. Nomi Bongo from Bongisile Holdings in Joburg. Hello, ladies from Bongisile. I'm so glad you could make it. I'm so happy to hear you guys are here. Keep it flowing, keep it coming. I'll also be watching the WhatsApp line to see who else on WhatsApp is joining us from around the country. Now, telling you about those speakers and those people that will be sharing with us. We call them experts here at I'm an Entrepreneur, you know? We call them experts, and then at the end, we have what we call a guest entrepreneur. So here are our experts. First up, the author of the book that's up for giveaways is Musa Kalenga. He's a futurist. He's also a co-founder and CEO of Bridge Labs. He's also the man in charge of all things digital at the Brave Group, a man I'm co-invested with. He's a partner of mine in a few businesses, and I'm so happy to have him here as well. And then we also need to take stock of the year that was from an economic perspective. You know, economists like to say that if there's one thing entrepreneurs should hope for, it is a very good economy, a growing economy. Because if an economy is growing, it means we are doing well. So guess what? From FNB, they brought in the chief economist, yes, chief of the chiefs, all right? Her name is Mamelo Katikinga Ngwenya. Mamelo will be joining us and giving us a perspective of the year that was, and hopefully some tips of the year that's to come. Very important for us as entrepreneurs to have a fair sense of what we can expect in the year ahead. And then mental wellness, something we don't often pause and take a moment to think about. And it's important for an entrepreneur to have their head in the right space to be successful. And we've done just that for you today. Vuyo Temba, she's a clinical psychologist. She's a founder of a business called KTM Consulting. And she will be taking us through some important tips of how you and I can stay mentally aware, not be overwhelmed by the events of 2020, not be discouraged about the businesses of ours we may have lost in this year. get the encouragement and the right mind frame to start again, potentially in a different business, potentially in a different industry, and look at life ahead with a lot more positivity. She also tells me she's going to be doing a practical exercise with us this morning. So prepare yourselves to woosa a little bit today. Prepare yourselves to close your eyes and get into the realm of your mind space with Vuyo later on. And then our highlight of the day as we get to the end of our session today, our guest entrepreneur today is a man who has defied all odds, particularly in this lockdown. Every other week, I tune into his social media status. The man is launching yet another store. People said people are not going to go to malls. People are not going to go shop. Well, guess what? This man, in the middle of COVID, in the middle of lockdown, has started putting out there more and more stores for his own invention, and that is Batu Shoes. This man's name is Theo Baloy. He'll be joining us, both talking to us about his journey, but also we are going to be going to him live at his store opening in East London this morning. He'll be tuning in live right here at I'm an Entrepreneur Digital Summit to give us a sense of what the store looks like, and he'll tell us more about his plans, and we'll get to be able to interact with him. So you must start preparing your own questions for him as well. All right, I see more and more of you guys are joining from different parts of the country. J Berry Consulting is the name of Nundubiso's company. You're most welcome, J Berry. I hope that you will find this plan and this session here today that's been organized just for you to take stock of the year that was and start planning for 2021. I want to thank all of our partners. Obviously, our main partner, FNB, has been with us on this journey. Thank you so much, FNB. We appreciate your support. Long may it last. Long may you also be able to answer the question of how can we help you? This is us helping entrepreneurs, and I'm so glad you're on the journey. I personally look forward to another 2021 with you as well. We've got many more entrepreneurs that are coming from different companies. Barlow World is here. Shivas and the Pernod Ricard team is here. Coca-Cola beverages entrepreneurs are here. Gauteng Tourism is here. Google is here. Limpopo Tourism is here. Renault is here. SIFA, the Small Enterprise Finance Agency, is here. Shell South Africa is here. ShopRite is also here with entrepreneurs across the country. Now, quick housekeeping rules. The Zoom, if you got any comments, like I already said, Q&A is where you hit me with your questions. The chat group is where you essentially chat. Anything you want to share, any links you want to share, any information you want to share, including telling me where you're tuning in from. I see more of you have joined. You haven't reported, you haven't signed the register. Please sign the register. Tell me where you're tuning from and where you're at this morning. And if you're joining through our website, you know our WhatsApp line, 078-3500-768. I'm going to make sure I'm keeping in touch with all the WhatsApps that you've got. My phone is right here next to me, so I can get all of your messages as and when you WhatsApp. So please make sure you WhatsApp during the session. Any questions you might have, whoever you want them for, send them to me before time so that when we get to the Q&A, we know where you stand. Our handle, for those that want to share as much information that's going on today, to everybody that's not here today, hashtag IAAE Digital Summit, hashtag IAAE Digital Summit. And like I said, the most active person on social media, the most active person on the Q&A, the most active person on WhatsApp, the most active person on the chat group, you stand a chance to win this awesome book from Musa Kalenga, which we'll be hearing from in no time at all. And right at the end, we are going to be doing minutes of our meeting. Three Stick Men is back, Lita is here. She'll be doing a great diagram for all of us, which we'll be sharing with all of you as a memoir of the session that we had today. Now, one of the things we're going to be having for the session today are polls. And I want us to make sure that all of you guys know how these work, right? So we're going to try one right now, okay? There's our first poll. How are you this morning? How are you today? 1, I'm committed to finishing the year strong. 2, I'm just a robot right now. And 3, is it December yet, boss? That's for the person who's ready to wrap up the year. Tell me which option most applies to you and how you are feeling this morning, so that I can get feedback from the poll and we can have a little bit more polls during our session today. Can I get the results so that I know how everybody's feeling? While I'm getting the results, I can see there's a lot of people already signing the register. Marlon Parker from R Labs, what a pleasure, my good sir, to join us. I hope more and more people from R Labs are with us this morning. Absolute pleasure to see you. Absolute pleasure to always work with you down in the Western Cape. Bongi Komos from Northern Cape. Wow. Welcome, Bongi. So great for you to join us all the way from the Northern Cape. And Emmanuel Pilani Ngube, he's in Durban. He's a catering business. Well, there you go. Everybody needs to eat. Eh? There's no doubt that people need to eat. So Mr. Ngube, thank you so much for joining us. And then Ashraf Gada, hey, how's that, hey? We've got Ashraf Gada from Champion South Africa. He says, as always, this is what I describe as a champion intervention. We thank you, Mr. Gada. We appreciate all the support that you give us. Absolutely cool to have you with us. Right, the polls are out. Most of you, 88% of you, are saying, I'm committed to finishing the year strong. And 12% of you are ready for December. Well, I think that number will be growing over time, the closer we get to December. But for the 88%, the vast majority here on this call today that are looking forward to finishing the year strong, I got news for you. Today is the 14th of November. South Africa is going to be open for yet probably another month because most people kind of get off around the 15th of December. So if ever there was a time for you to push really hard, it is now. And that's exactly what we're going to start with from listening to Mr. Musa Kaleng on the other side of this, helping us to get mentally ready for what has been 2020 and get mentally ready for what will be 2021. On the other side of this, Mr. Musa Kaleng.
You ready? You ready?
Make it happen in the Renault Kwid. Renault, the most fuel-efficient brand in SA.
Hello there, and a massive shout out to you, my I Am an Entrepreneur family. Thank you for having me back again. So pretty much just close off the year with a quick reflection on where we've come from and the challenges that we've all faced as small businesses and entrepreneurs, but more importantly, how to get excited about the future of where we're going and potentially some of the things that you could be thinking about to maximize on that future. Now, we all know we felt almost exactly the same way when COVID-19 hit. It was one of those situations where you've spent your time planning strategically, you've put into place KPIs, you're matching and you're monitoring your progress as you go along, and then all of a sudden it feels like you just got punched in the face. Mike Tyson was quoted as saying, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And this is how I certainly felt when COVID-19 hit. A big part of being punched in the face meant that every plan that I had in place had to be challenged, had to be cancelled, or had to be fundamentally revisited. And since that point, the government has decided that they're going to be taking our organizations on an economic recovery plan. And Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, was quoted as saying, we are determined not merely to return our economy to the state it was before coronavirus, but to forge a new economy in a new global reality. Now, the South African Economic Restructuring Recovery Plan generally has 3 phases, which we need to all be concerned about and understand very clearly as small businesses. The first phase is about engaging and preserving, effectively meaning that there's a comprehensive response to health resources to try and save lives and curb the spread. And the second is all about recovery and reform, which includes interventions that help us to restore the economy, but also controlling the health risks. And lastly, reconstruct and transform, which entails building sustainable, resilient, and inclusive economies. Now, these 3 pillars are really important to think about, not only for our country, South Africa, but also for our continent, because we've got a challenge that we need to solve for. And that challenge is something that should bother all of us deeply. If we think about how far Africa is behind when it comes to development of economic affairs, there was a process that began in the 1600s. Effectively, the Congo Convention was set up at a time when all the superpowers got together. They decided they would colonize Africa. They cut it up on a map and they went forth to colonize. And in that period, they went from effectively having European presence to having presence on the African continent. So if you think about that as a landmark in our timeline, that creates a 200-year gap, a 200-year economic gap. And our challenge is that over the next couple of years, I believe we've got probably a 10-year window to be able to address that 200-year gap. The East and the West have all very clear plans for Africa. And our challenge as small businesses and entrepreneurs is what is our plan to be able to meet them, but also compete effectively in such a way that we're able to grow our economies and grow our businesses. So if we look back to the year 2020, which is a very painful year, it's important to take note of some key moments and key milestones that are really important for small, medium businesses. The first of which is if you think about the 23rd of March when lockdown was announced, hard lockdown level 5, what we saw happening is the revenue from small businesses going from 95% to dropping just above 10% in a short period of time. that revenue continued to be exactly the same, kind of teetering between 8%, but not more than 30% between the time periods B and C. And then after C, what we started to see is as we've opened up the economy and we start to engage people and allow them to trade, revenues are recovering, but we're only up to 44%. So this picture is really important for small businesses because ultimately navigating through these different phases is really important. And ultimately, what also happened when the announcement was made is that the nation went through a period of shock. And what I thought to myself was, as a person that is running businesses myself, I had this palpable sense of loss. I had a really, really tough time reconciling the fact that the world had changed so much. And one interesting character that I started researching during this time is this stunning looking old lady, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross made her name studying tragic moments and near-death or before-death experiences. And she developed an interesting view on how we need to be thinking about it for us to not only navigate it, but for us to co-locate ourselves on the journey so that we're conscious of the things that we have to do. The first part of understanding the Kubler-Ross change curve is to understand human morale and competence, and how this changes over time when you've been exposed to something quite as shocking as we found with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown that ensued. So the first stage of this process ultimately is a shock, because you don't know what has happened. You're surprised around everything that is transpiring, but the first reaction is you're shocked because it's difficult to make sense of what has happened. Now I can't trade anymore. The business I've had for the last 10, 20, 15 years is not able to generate me income. I'm not able to give security to my family. That's a really shocking experience to go through. And so this surprise leads us to a point where we start also looking at, finding almost research and resources and places to verify our own disbelief. So the second phase is really about denial. So you're trying to find for ways to either prove yourself or contradict yourself or confirm some of the things that you're thinking. And this denial process is something that can actually get you into a very difficult space. And a lot of companies in South Africa went through denial, and a lot of businesses closed due to COVID-19 because entrepreneurs just couldn't get themselves out of that rut. And so when you go from denial, what happens is that you get into frustration. You recognize that things have changed and they're different, but you almost become angry. It's an emotional space to be because you just want to get things done, and you can't because things have changed so fundamentally. You then get to a place where you actually could be very depressed. You got a low mood, you lack energy, you're lethargic, and a lot of people went through this silently without ever saying anything about it. And so the trick around a great leader or a great manager is being able to recognize and help people who are going through these challenges and enable them to start thinking about how they can start to recover over time. And the next phase is really about experimentation. When you've gone through the lowest of the low and you've been depressed, experimentation really allows you to start engaging with the new world and the new context. You start coming out of your shell, you start thinking about doing things differently, but more importantly, you start prioritizing reintegrating yourself into a world that's changed forever. And so this Kubler-Ross change curve is an important reflection for all of us as small businesses and entrepreneurs on potentially where we are on the curve. And what we need to do to be able to see ourselves through to get to a point where we're integrating and we're adding value as an organization. A lot of people have actually, started out from this year being called #20plenty to the notion that no one's buying into the next year until they see a trailer, which effectively is this principle of we want to integrate and we want to do things in a way that's different, but I'd like the risk to be minimized as much as possible so I don't go through the same thing again at all. And so when you're thinking about this principle of, I would like to see a trailer, it's almost trying to see what the future has in store. And so thinking about the future brings us to an exciting place where we can look forward to the year 2021. In fact, the year 2021, I think, could be a watershed year for a lot of businesses, especially those that survived. For leaders and business owners that are trying to move from this very torrid year 2020 to 2021, you almost have to think about your business in the same way Hernan Cortez thought about his conquests. Hernan Cortez led the Aztec mission that effectively overthrew an empire at a time where nobody had managed to defeat the Aztec empire. And so what Hernan Cortez used to do, and he's famous for, is when he'd arrive on a new land or in a new beach, they would effectively burn the boats. And this principle of burning the boats was, number one, a signal of very clear intent. It means that we're going forward and not backwards. And so as you're leading people who have come through a really tough 2020, you almost have to adopt this principle that burning the boats means we're doing it differently and we're moving in that direction. We also have to think about the fact that, sharp turns are going to be present on our journeys as entrepreneurs and in our lives. But the trick is that a sharp turn only becomes dangerous if you forget to turn. And this forgetting to turn really becomes a key differentiator between yourself and your competitors. Those that decide that they're going to keep their businesses exactly the same are likely to be the ones that find danger in these sharp turns that we experience in the road ahead. And so big things that we need to consider is also that the changing face of the African narrative is key. We come from a place where we were being called the hopeless continent, where everything to do with Africa was about handouts and helping us just kind of get out of the economic mess that we found ourselves in. But what we start to see over the years is that this narrative changes, right? It changes to something that's fundamentally different. It's about Africa rising. It's about the lions on the move. It's about being able to embrace what's happening going forward. And so if you're looking forward to 2021, rest assured that everybody is looking for us to be able to produce businesses and create solutions that deliver, that create value, and that will be sustainable. And so the context which we operate really is about, understanding your relationship with this notion of disruption. And people have different experiences and there were different understandings of what disruption is all about. But I'm a firm believer that disruption is a gift. If we think about where we're at as people, the age of augmentation is upon us. And when you think about augmentation, disruption can really be a key differentiator that you could use. But you also have to think about technology in 3 phases. The first phase is passive technology. Back in the day, the Roman Empire went around the world colonizing lots of different lands, and they'd bring slaves back to the Roman Empire because they were building their economy. Slaves would give them manpower and labor. And through a process of very strategic colonization, they started building up these reserves so that they would become the superpower of the day. So as a slave, when you came to the Roman Empire, number one, you had two ways pretty much to get your freedom back. The first was you would die, go figure. The second is that you could fight as a gladiator in a Colosseum. And if you won, you'd get your freedom given back to you. What also happened when you won is that they etched you into history. And this process of etching was interesting because it's someone taking a hammer and a chisel and chiseling your face into a stone. And so you get the statuette that gets produced. Now, at that time, this technology was seen to be very advanced technology because the will of the human and the will of the stone could produce something that was different and exciting and new and ultimately quite beautiful. As technology evolves, we get to a point where we know about generative technology. And generative technology is interesting because it's ultimately when you think about sliding your hand over a mouse pad and together with a computer, you can now generate an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. And this generative process takes the best of the human and the best of the computer, and you create something together. Where we find ourselves now, and what's exciting about looking forward, is that we're in the world of intuitive technology. And intuitive technology really is about knowing that access to data and information is kind of going up. So there's gazillions of pieces of information out there, but computing capability similarly is also going up. So when you think about quantum computing, where you can take all this data and put it in a machine and generate insight and business and ideas and concepts, this is the world of intuitive technology, where problems are solved without knowing exactly what you're solving for, but you create a solution before you know you have the problem. And this becomes exciting because if you're a value creator or you're a business person, this world of intuition allows you to be able to optimize not only on being able to create excitement in your business, it also allows you to think about the opportunities that come naturally within this world of intuition. Firstly, the shifts that have brought about the world of intuition is that consumers are going from conscious consumerism, from wealth to well-being. So issues that relate to where my food comes from, how it is manufactured, the process it followed become really important. Biotech, which is the beginning of superhumans. I have scleral lenses in my eyes, which is not fancy, but it allows me to get 20/20 vision, whereas if I wear my sunglasses, I get 40% vision. If I don't have my glasses, I got minus 14% vision. So biotech, as an example, is the beginning of us enhancing and augmenting ourselves as human beings. Now, with that, we're obviously creating new problems that we need to solve for, but we need to think about those things as we build businesses and as we think about the future. The Internet of Robotic Things is an amazing opportunity. It's the next level of Internet of Things, which effectively is putting robots in between the connected network of things. And those robots now start to create value and they do things. Voice technology, a new way to pay for us is, right now when we give voice orders to our phones or our cars, they execute on them and it's quite functional. But we're starting to evolve to a point where you're going to be using voice technology to pay for things, which is a whole new commerce that's going to open up for us. Think about urbanization and rural innovation. We know we're going to have to find people places to stay in cities. I think 70% of the world will be staying in cities by 2032, sorry. And in so doing, those cities need to accommodate people, make them comfortable, create ways they can move around, and ultimately create spaces where people can live. Autonomous mobility becomes important. Real deep fake is also really, really critical to consider in the world that we live in. If you look at just the elections, you can create ultimately media with anything that mimics the real thing, but is actually not. The education of consumers along that journey becomes really, really important. Permeating all of these is, this notion of privacy, morality, and trustworthiness, is that organizations will be held to a higher standard. And you'll actually see a movement around these shameable business models where consumers will be looking at your business and actually being able to shame you for not doing the right things, not being able to follow the correct process, not being able to ensure that people know where your food comes from or what the process that you take them through to get from source to shelf. That becomes really important in this new world that we're talking about. And my favorite is this open ecosystems thought, is that everything is going to be ultimately connected, and you have to figure out how you make your business an open business, which means people can integrate into you and you can integrate into other people. These are the real amazing opportunities that we're going to see, but ultimately requires us to think about the world that we're going into very differently. It requires us to think about adaptability as the key thing that will drive our success. So not being the strongest, not being the biggest balance sheet, not the most intelligent, but how adaptable you are to be able to meet some of those trends and be able to actually capitalize on them. Those trends are driven fundamentally by the access to data and information and computing technology. And so if you think about where you are as a person and as a business owner, there's some behaviors that I think will help you to unlock these opportunities in a more intuitive world. So think about self-leadership and your relationship between yourself and yourself, right? How you get yourself to be able to, number one, take information from outside, apply it to your world, and be able to create value quickly. That process in itself is something that becomes really valuable. The second lever that you have as a person trying to disrupt yourself is to think about how well you've made peace with the fact that the world has changed. And so this agility that gives you the ability to respond with information and data, and then this mental resolve that you think the world's going to be different, are really how you lead yourself as an individual, trying to unlock opportunities in the intuitive world. It's also important that we have a deep embrace and appreciation of transformation. According to research, more transformed teams, number one, are better at problem solving, but also problem identification. And so a deep embrace of transformation means that bring different people into your organization and get them to interact with really interesting problems. And you've got a high probability of succeeding if they do. And last but not least is technology literacy. Be mindful and be aware that younger people tend to be more technology literate, but as leaders in these organizations, we need to up our game, not to know everything about everything, but just to be literate enough to understand when things are changing and why they're changing. Because through that, you can also identify patterns and potentially create opportunities for your business. So I really, really hope that we're going to try and think about this as an opportunity. And it's really difficult having come through this year, but I'm really optimistic about 2021. I hope that you've got as much excitement as I do, and I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.
This is the I'm an Entrepreneur Digital Summit in association with FNB and these partners.
Thank you very much, Musa Kalenga. We really appreciate that, my good sir. Let me just make sure I got my video back on here. There we go. Oops. Thank you so much, Musa. Appreciate all of the work that you've done there. Yes, indeed. Trends for 2021, very clear to me, and also how we can live in this intuitive world and how we can plan ahead. I particularly like the point that you raised around self-leadership and how important that is. Thank you so, so much. Next up, Mamelo Katikingagwenya, Chief Economist at FNB. Let's talk about the economy. Over you, Mamelo.
Good morning, all. For this part of the presentation, I'll just be taking a few minutes looking at the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the South African economy, and also just maybe sharing our expectations for the SA economic outlook. So I think, just the way that we've looked at how South Africa has experienced this shock, it is through three different channels: the current account, the capital account, as well as a domestic and supply shock. The first and the second shock we've experienced before in 1998, 2001, as well as 2008. And here we saw a collapse in our exports. We saw global growth decline quite significantly. Commodity prices also took quite a big knock, and tourism receipts also declined. And the capital account shock came through the financial markets. We saw equity prices decline. The rand weakened quite significantly. It reached highs of 19 to the dollar. We saw a lift in the cost of funding and, of course, capital outflows. The third shock we've never experienced before, which is the domestic supply and demand shock. And this was on the back of the measures that were taken to contain the spread of the virus. We saw a collapse in the production of goods and services as we moved through the risk-adjusted strategy or the different levels of the lockdown, and a collapse in domestic demand. Unemployment has increased quite significantly. Stats SA released unemployment numbers this week. And of course, consumer and business confidence took a big hit and earnings also declined. So this is basically the framework that we used to try and assess and understand the impact of the pandemic into the South African economy. And we've also looked at how activity has performed during the hard lockdown and as we moved through the risk-adjusted strategy. And it's quite clear that in the second quarter of this year, as a lot of companies are closed down, industry turnover declined quite significantly. But what we're seeing is that activity and there's some recovery that we're seeing in activity is getting back to levels that we experienced just before the lockdown. So just in terms of how all of this translates into our forecast and our thinking around the South African economy for 2020 right through to 2022, our expectations are for the economy to contract by around 8% this year, and to improve to around 3% next year, and to sort of get back to the growth rates that we're experiencing before the pandemic of around 0.5% in 2022. So in the short term, we of course expecting to see a moderate recovery across all sectors. Investment and credit extension is expected to remain quite low. We expect the income squeeze to lift precautionary savings. So a lot of people are worried about the future and saving a little bit more. We're also seeing this, similar trends in the corporate sector. Government debt rather to increase. We saw this in the budget that was delivered by Minister Mboweni. So these are the short-term expectations. And then over the long term, we expect low income to constrain growth. And this is, I guess, a function of what you're seeing in the labor market. And we expect activity to remain concentrated in consumption sectors and sovereign risk to lift. And I think maybe to add, some of the developments that we've seen over the past couple of days, the outcome of the US election, as well as the vaccine, implicit in our thinking is that there isn't a third and a fourth wave of the pandemic. So we think that the vaccine, of course, challenges our thinking around longer term economic growth, so around 2022 and beyond. It does suggest that there is potential upside to our forecast, and how you would see that transmit to the South African economy would be business confidence increasing, consumer confidence also increasing, and a stronger rand. And in terms of the Biden win, we've seen that financial markets have received that news quite positively, and we certainly expect it to increase risk appetite. And then again, we'll see signs of that through the currency. But we are still awaiting the outcome of Senate, which is quite important as it has implications for fiscal policy. But the point is really that there is some upside potential, or upside risk rather, to our 2022 forecast. But I think it's also just quite important over the longer term. So over the immediate term, I would say the downside risk rather is the second wave that we're seeing, which potentially threatens the recovery in 2021. And I think locally as well, what we've seen is this reform agenda and the plan by the president to boost economic growth through the infrastructure drive and so on, challenges our view for 2022, and certainly presents opportunities over the long term. So over the short term, we're quite worried, but we do assess the risk over the long term to be somewhat to the upside. And I think just on the labor market, it was quite clear that the distribution of the impact was disproportionate. The pandemic has hit, I would say, people on the lower spectrum in terms of earnings and income, whereas people that work in permanent and highly skilled jobs have managed to retain their work, and it comes through strongly when we look at job losses by type of employment contract. You can see that people on limited duration or unspecified duration, which is basically contract work, have really had to bear the brunt of this shock that we're experiencing, and people that are employed on a permanent basis, the job losses, they haven't been as severe as they've been in the other types of employment. And I think just in terms of business and consumer confidence, of course, that took quite a big knock at the onset of the pandemic. We're seeing somewhat of an improvement, but I think in general, consumers remain pessimistic, and they remain very concerned about their household finances. And we're seeing this, across the board. Low income earners are, their confidence is low, and so is confidence in the high income brackets. Business confidence was weak going into the pandemic. We're seeing a bit of an improvement, but nonetheless, it remains below that 50 mark that separates, optimism and pessimism. And we're seeing it across all the sectors in the economy. And I think the implications of all of this, so a very weak economy, a very weak labor market, suggests to us that prices should remain contained in the economy. So we expect inflation to remain relatively muted. Our forecast suggests that it should remain around the target band of around 4.5% throughout the forecast horizon. I think if we think about it, of course, passing on higher costs to consumers becomes quite difficult in this environment. Service providers, an example would be your medical aid insurance. Discovery announced that it's not going to escalate prices for the coming year. And where we're also seeing pressure is in the rental market, where consumers are not able to, some are not able to pay their rent, and landlords are hanging on to good quality tenants, and they're not looking to escalate prices. But I think at the same time, there has been quite a bit of opportunity, especially in that property market, which I'll highlight quite shortly. But the point here is the economy is underperforming, the labor market is under significant amount of strain, consumer confidence is weak. As I said, precautionary savings are increasing, and that means that general demand has been quite low, and prices have also remained fairly low. And the consequence of that, of course, is that interest rates have also been quite accommodative. The central bank has cut rates quite aggressively this year, and we are of the view that we are quite close to the turn of the interest rate cutting cycle. But the point really is that we expect interest rates to remain lower for longer. And just to bring it back to the example I was trying to make earlier around the property market, we're certainly seeing the benefit of these interest rate cuts throughout the year in the property market, where we're seeing a lot of new entrants in the market. So people that were thinking of buying a home, the cut in interest rates has improved affordability, and we've seen quite, I think I would say, relatively strong appetite come through in the property market. So I think it has provided some opportunity and some relief. I mean, one could make the argument that an interest rate cut sort of has a disproportionate impact on the economy, that you have to have access to credit to be able to benefit fully from it. And that is true. But the point is that I think in terms of getting activity going, it has certainly worked in certain areas. And I think just in terms of where we see opportunities, as I said, I think the pandemic has had a huge negative impact on the South African economy in the short to medium term. But over the long term, we certainly think that there are areas of opportunities. And if one looks at this from a sectorial point of view, agriculture is one sector that has been quite resilient throughout the crisis. And we certainly think that there's opportunities in high value crops like avocados, macadamias, and etc. And there's opportunities in alternative bioenergy. We've seen this in KZN in the sugarcane sector, and agro-processing presents an opportunity. I would say that mining is, of course, a huge function of what we see happening in the regulatory environment. Manufacturing, there are opportunities in our view anyway in agro-processing, as well as localization. The president spoke quite at length around localization and industrialization as part of the plan in terms of how we reform and we grow the economy. And if those plans do indeed happen, we think that manufacturing is one of the sectors that will benefit from it. Utilities, we see opportunities in alternative energy sources, your renewables, a greener economy, so solar, wind, and hydro, and so on. And round 5 of that renewable programs is going to be open, so it certainly presents upside opportunities in the sector. I would say construction is a function of whether government is able to get going with the plans or the reform agenda that they've put forward. Retail, we've seen how consumers have changed their behavior, and people are shopping a little bit more online, and I think there's an opportunity for warehousing, delivery services, and I think also for consumers that are looking for alternatives. We think that buying down will benefit some small, medium enterprises. And in terms of the transport and concept, I think what I would like to highlight in that sector is the IT sector, which, as we all know, was defined as an essential service during the pandemic. And the government removed some of the obstacles that typically stand in the way of network deployment. And the auction of spectrum, of course, also presents quite a bit of opportunity. And I think maybe lastly, I'd like to highlight the financial FREBs, that's what it's called, finance, real estate, and business services. We've seen that traditional business models are being challenged. And with new, platform players entering the space, Time Bank, Zero, as well as Discovery, I think that it increases competition. Then, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more of it in the future. So we definitely think that there is opportunities in that specific sector. And I think for my part of the presentations today, that's where I would like to leave it. Thank you all.
This is the I'm an Entrepreneur Digital Summit in association with FNB and these partners.
Thank you very much to Mamelo for that presentation. Really much appreciated. And of course, you did see coming from her even tips of the industries that she says are the winners that are likely to be coming forward. Next up, we do have our clinical psychologist ready to join us. I hope she will be. If the team could allow me to please bring back my video. For some reason, I can't bring back my video. Thank you very much. Hopefully, we'll be having our clinical psychologist. Where is Vuyo Temba? She'll be joining us in the next few minutes, and she'll be doing a live presentation. And then she'll be taking us through a practical session on how we should deal with 2020 and look forward to 2021. Musa has already told us what kind of leadership style we need to make sure we are successful. And now Mamelo has given us a very good sense of what has happened in 2020 and also what is likely to happen in 2021. I particularly enjoyed her references to the labor force. I was going to hope that because of what's happened to jobs, government will make it a little bit easier for you and I as entrepreneurs to hire and fire as and when we need people, right? And not have a situation where we have to deal with unions and everything else, just so that you allow the labor force to be a little bit more dynamic. But hopefully that's still to come. Consumers are pessimistic. I don't know about you guys, but that worries me as an owner of a business that needs, one of my businesses is a consumer-facing business. I need those people to keep coming to spend. So if they're not going to spend, I'll be interested to hear what Mamelo thinks. And then she talked about rentals, right? She said, no, people are starting to pay rent. And I was wondering whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? I guess if you're in property, it's a bad thing. But if you're not in property and you're trying to get into property, this might be a good time for you to start thinking about buying property. So we're going to explore that a little bit later with Mamelo when we get to the Q&A. But right now, though, Sis Vuyo, are you ready? I hand over to you.
Thank you, Thank you, Andile. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. Just getting the opportunities to speak to entrepreneurs, and often, I'm sure in business, from my experience in the business spaces, we often get told there's no place for psychology. Why do we need psychology? And hopefully during this, the next 15, 20 minutes, you can understand why it is. So today I've decided to sort of coin my talk around healing, you know, in terms of, I'll just share my screen as well. Okay.
It's coming, no worries. It says
Okay.
it's starting. There we go.
It's still on the road somewhere.
It's still on the road.
But why I chose this particular theme in terms of healing, I think as an entrepreneur, I'd like to think of myself as an entrepreneur, even though I know I'm self-employed. But I find that, you know, this year has been one of those most difficult years, I think, for all of us. There's been losses, there's been trauma that we've gone through, trauma of different types for that matter, and prepare ourselves for the new year. We have to heal from those things that we've experienced so that we don't then start carrying them into the future. So if I look at what healing is, I think on a basic level, you know, for me, and if I look at also how the Oxford Dictionary defines it, it's a process of making or becoming sound or healthy again. So if we think of a process of being healthy and sound again, it means at some point, we did experience this sense of soundness, this sense of health. So which then immediately means it's something that is not very far-fetched. And so if I look at it just briefly, I think on a most simple level, it's just that process of restoration to health or restoration of health. Time heals all wounds. I'm sure we've all had this expression. And I'm sad to say that actually time does not heal all wounds. All that time does is time buys us time. But what heals the wounds is what we do with that which we have experienced that have created these wounds. And again, like I said, you know, if I look at this year in terms of just what we've all gone through, I'm sure everyone would have some pain, would have experienced the pain of sorts. But what's going to determine what happens between this year and next year is the transition we make in terms of how are we going to deal with these wounds or the pains that we've gone through. And if I look at what is it that we need to heal from as entrepreneurs, it's quite if I just sum it up, for me, there's been three things I think all of us need to heal from as we move into the new year. And the first one has to be the loss. If there's a time where we've never incurred, if anybody has never experienced the loss, this year is one of the years that shows us that we're all human, because all of us had some loss of some kind, whether it was the loss of revenue, loss of our clients, loss of our savings, loss of loved ones, family ones. Some of us even lost our own identity. If you reflect on it, if I say I'm an entrepreneur, how am I an entrepreneur if I'm not dealing in the business of doing what I need to do? So there has been all of those losses. And unfortunately, often what happens is that as entrepreneurs, we think we don't have time to sit, to wallow. We just need to keep moving. But the reality is we can't keep moving unless we deal with the stuff that we have to deal with, because if we do, it will catch up with us at some point. The second thing, I think all of us, or some of us, at least as an entrepreneur, that I think we would have lost is opportunities. I mean, when I speak to people, there were things that were lined up. All of us started with great plans of what we wanted to do this year. And yes, there were those opportunities that presented themselves. Some of them were missed, but some of them were taken. But also what I found very difficult during this time, personally as an entrepreneur, is that even when those opportunities were there, we still were left with a sense of guilt, because it almost feels like, how do I benefit from somebody else's misery? Because we were still going through the pandemic. And the last thing we need to heal from is the trauma. I know at some point we may think, but I didn't experience trauma, because we often think of trauma as this bloody experience, this, where blood has to gush out, I have to feel in a particular way. But if we look at what trauma is in its basic form, is anything that was just sudden and that the brain did not know how to cope with. And this pandemic is one of those, I think, because none of us saw it coming. None of us knew that was, to say the least, none of us even thought by this time we would be still under some form of lockdown. And so that in itself creates trauma to the brain. And we know that a traumatized brain, sometimes it is also a brain that struggles to then deal and work with things as they are happening. But most of all, it's the challenge of having to see things for what they are, because a traumatic brain will perceive things in a traumatized manner. So what does this process involve, or what needs to change as we prepare ourselves to bounce back? For me, I've chosen 4 key things that I think would be important during this time. And one of them is the one most important one, which is to be yourself. As an entrepreneur at this time, I think we were all tested in terms of who we are. Our boundaries, not to say the least, were tested. Our own beliefs were tested. The opinions we had about ourselves were also tested. So a lot of who we are was tested. And I'm sure some of us were sitting and thinking, is this really what I need to be doing? Is this where I want to be? And I think the one way to bounce back is to look at, who am I? Can I allow myself to be the person that I know myself to be? And unfortunately this time also, it's that moment where we would have to put those boundaries. It's very easy to still want to be accessible to everyone. And I'm sure as the year starts, there'll be many other opportunities that will be created. And people will be expecting that because you've been waiting for this opportunity, therefore, there will be no boundaries. And it's important to be able to create these boundaries, because then they help us to know what it is that we can take and what it is that we cannot take. And I think at the core of this is really those issues around self-awareness as an individual, but also as an entrepreneur. The second thing for me that I thought would be key is getting a grip on your mind. We've often heard that everything that we do is actually directed by the thoughts that we have. And this is very true, because if you look at how our behaviors ultimately are observed, at the core of where they start is the thoughts we have around ourselves. So if I'd like to think of it as thoughts, or even times beliefs that we hold about whether ourselves, about things, about others. So the thoughts that we think, to a large extent, are the ones that cause us distress. Okay, and one may ask, how is it that my thoughts cause me distress? If we are already thinking, I was very excited to hear from Mamelo's presentation that there are opportunities that are coming. But at this point, the thoughts that we hold and the beliefs that we have around what has happened during this time could direct us in not being able to see those opportunities, because all of it starts in our thoughts. Okay, and why it's important to get a grip of our mind is because the thoughts that we have will have a direct impact on the things that we feel. So if I believe that all dogs are dangerous, obviously, when I see a dog, I'm going to start reacting in a particular way, or I'm going to start experiencing certain feelings. So because I'm scared, I am going to then run away, which means the thoughts that I've had about, or the beliefs that I had about what is in front of me is now causing me so much pain and so much fear that I have to now run away. And because I would have ran away, it further reinforces the fact that actually I was right. The dogs are really dangerous. And so this applies for all types of thoughts that we have, including positive thoughts, including affirming thoughts that we have around ourselves. And so that's why it's important to identify the thoughts that you have, the beliefs that you have, you know, whether it's to the extent of what beliefs you hold about yourself. What beliefs do you hold about your business? What thoughts do you have about your industry, your clients, your markets, yourself? So, because in being able to identify what these thoughts that are driving our behaviors, that are driving our fears and all these things, we are able then to dispute them. Because if we dispute them, we then can get to a place where sometimes we realize that these thoughts are just thoughts, and we do not necessarily have to act on them. Whereas there are thoughts that, yes, we need to go dispute and then substitute them with some form of alternative thought process. The third thing we need to do is to flip that anxiety switch off. Again, if I link this back to the thoughts and beliefs that we have, a lot of the anxiety that we may experience as people is often linked to the thoughts and the belief systems that we, or the beliefs we hold around a particular thing. And most of us are constantly anxious, particularly in the spaces that we find ourselves in as entrepreneurs, where you trying to do something, you working on something, but at the same time, there's the fear, there's the worry of whether it will work. That in itself then could easily create this anxiety that becomes disabling. There is normal anxiety, but normal anxiety will subside as soon as you start doing something. But what we're referring to here is that type of anxiety that becomes so disabling that we're no longer able to move. And unfortunately, some of us as well have taught ourselves that, we even make fun of it or make light of it when we start saying things like, I work well when I'm stressed, I work well when I'm anxious. Reality is none of us work well in anxiety. And there is no positive outcome out of reaching a state of constant anxiety, because when we are at that place, it changes how we see ourselves. It changes even the structure of our brain, that we're not able to then engage in cognitive functions that otherwise we would have been able to engage in with ease had we not had this anxiety. And the last thing that I think we need to do as we prepare ourselves is letting go of the past. I don't want to say forget the past, because I don't think we forget. And the reason we don't forget is because memories can never be erased. But what happens and is possible is that we can move on from the past. And the pains that we've experienced this year, I know sometimes some of us find it difficult to let go of the past because we feel justified for feeling what we feel, whether it's the fact that things didn't work out the way we had planned. But it's important to know that we can't control what happened to us, but we can mitigate that impact by dealing with it. And sometimes this is the most difficult part, because people will often ask me at times, what do you mean deal with emotions? deal with things that have happened, most of us always resort to either being in denial, to suppressing whatever pain that we feel or whatever experiences that we may have experienced. And that makes it difficult to move on, because what we suppress will ultimately lead to us being depressed. And think of running a business in a state of depression. It is really, it takes really a lot. And in this process as well, for us to be able to move on and let go of the past, we would need to reach a level of acceptance. We first have to accept that what happened, happened. And it's saddening to see that as we still go around, there are people who still say, hey, you know, COVID, as if there is anything we can change about it now. And it's important to understand that it has happened, it is happening, and we have no control. But what we have control is that we can accept that which has happened. Some of us are even struggling to accept that there's business dealings we went into, not being aware that we would be where we are now. And again, if we look at that, it's about, can we allow ourselves to accept that things have happened the way they've happened? Because if we are able to accept, then we could move into the next process, which is around forgiving ourselves. Forgiving ourselves for the opportunities that we did not take. Andile spoke about probably investing in property. Mamelo also said something about it. Most of us are beating ourselves up because we didn't see the opportunity then. Most of us didn't buy those stocks back then when it was lucrative to buy them. And some of us are now beating ourselves up. And it's important that we realize that it has happened. We need to accept, and we then therefore need to forgive ourselves. I'm going to take you through just one exercise that would help with the process of just allowing that process of acceptance. It's something very unconventional. I'm not trying to hypnotize anyone, just in case people are sitting there and thinking we're going into hypnosis. But I would like you to just take these few minutes to probably just allow yourself to be comfortable wherever you are sitting. Allow yourself to be comfortable. If you can, close your eyes. I want you to just imagine how it would have been like if COVID-19 had not happened. So close your eyes and just imagine for a moment how it would feel like if COVID-19 did not happen. And when you have this feeling and it's clear in your mind, I want you now to remember a time where you felt exactly like that. Just take yourself to a moment in your life when you felt exactly like that. Okay. When you have and you remember this moment, I need to keep it, you to keep it in your mind. We'll need that experience or that memory later. And every time I say you need to go to that time, I would like you to pan back to this memory. Okay. And now I want you to imagine yourself doing something. It's in a week's time, it's in 2 weeks' time, you're doing something, whatever it is. It could be something that you ordinarily would do on a day-to-day basis. But as you're busy with this thing, I want you to imagine, and you have this feeling that you know you've just moved on, and you suddenly feel completely comfortable with yourself, and it feels exactly like that time. Okay. So just now imagine yourself doing something in 2 weeks' time, in a week's time, where you know you've just moved on and you feel completely comfortable with yourself, and it feels just like it did that time. Okay. Now I want you to remember the very worst part of the way things are at the moment. So go to the worst memory that you have of the way things are at the moment. I want you to go into this memory. You're not watching it and sitting from outside. You are going into it. You are in this memory. It almost feels like you are replaying everything that happened. Okay. And I want you, as you sit, just pay attention to what you're feeling and where you're feeling it. And at this point, I want you to just freeze this moment, freeze that experience, that moment. Make sure that it's absolutely frozen. It's still, it's not moving. The only thing that would be moving in this moment is you who's looking from the inside. And now just start seeing yourself walk out of that bad memory. And as you walk out of this bad memory, you're walking immediately into something that feels exactly like that time. And it feels like it's some kind of video, mental video that's running in your mind, like you're literally right there at this point. Now you're going to go straight back to that frozen bad memory, noticing how faint it is right now. You rush into that mental video of that time, and as you play this video in your mind, you can feel every thought and every part of your brain just bringing back the feelings of that time to the moment where you are right now. And then you rush forward to a time in the future when you remember today and how easily it was to feel exactly the same way you always felt that time. And then you go back to that frozen bad memory, noticing how faint it is, rush into that mental video of that time. As you play this video in your mind, you feel every thought, every part of your brain, just bringing back the feelings of that time to the moment where you are right now. You rush forward to a time in the future, you remember today and how easily it was to feel exactly the same way you felt that time. And then you go back to that frozen bad memory, noticing how faint it is right now, rush into that mental video of that time. As you play this video in your mind, you feel every part, every thought of your brain, just bringing back all those feelings of that time to the moment of now when you remember today, just rushing forward to a time in the future when you remember how easily it was to feel exactly like that time. As you go back to that frozen bad memory, noticing how faint it is right now, rush into that mental video of that time. As you play back the feelings of that time to the moment of now, remember today, and that remember the day you discovered how easy it was to feel exactly like you always did that time. And back one more time to that frozen memory as it fades even more, and straight into that mental video of that time that now somehow seems to feel like it's filling your mind, it's filling your body, as if it's always been like that for the longest of time. And then just thinking of where you are right now and just allowing yourself to just be relaxed and calm and opening your eyes when you're absolutely ready to open them. Okay.
William.
Yes.
Ay, ay, ay. Okay.
Okay. So what we did there, just maybe to share a bit with you that experience, okay? So what happens often is that what makes it difficult for us to reach those points of acceptance, letting go, and forgiving ourselves is because we are still holding on to what should have been. So this process, what it helps with, it's just a small exercise. It engages your brain so that we create new pathways of seeing the situation that has happened, because most of us found ourselves helpless, found ourselves not able to do anything at this point. And so we always feel like I could have done something, but we know we couldn't have. So at some point, we just have to accept that there was nothing we could do. But remember, the brain sometimes finds it difficult to engage in that process. So what we've done now is we allow your brain to just create new neural pathways that allows you to be able to accept what has happened. And so if you even try going back to that bad memory that you had, if you go back to it now, you will find that it will not be as distressing as it was before, which means if it's not distressing in your brain, we can then start functioning. It doesn't become something that holds us back. We're able to move ourselves forward. And that's where I'll leave it, Andile. And maybe as we finish off, just to share one last quote. We need to be brave enough to heal, even when it hurts. And that's why healing is not glamorous. Healing is work. But just like you do the work on your finances, just like you do the work on building your balance sheet, it's the same kind of work we need to be doing you need to be well, and you need to have healed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vuyo. Wow, what an experience that is. And lots of interesting information, and I can tell you there's gonna be a lot of discussion in the Q&A. Thank you so much once again. Vuyo, our clinical psychologist, telling us that we need to be brave enough to heal. I like the other one point though that you did raise. Where's my notes now? It said, time does not heal all wounds, eh? How's that, eh? We always say time does, but apparently it doesn't. If you have any questions, please throw it into the Q&A box as I bring on Mamelo as well to join us for a brief Q&A with Vuyo. In case you guys may have some questions, I've got a few of my own. I will also send them through. Mamelo, thank you so much for joining us this Saturday. We enjoyed your presentation that you did for us. We really did. In fact, I'm going to start with you, Mamelo, because, you know, lots of small business owners like we've got on the panel today listen to people like you, the economists, rattle out all of these stats and graphs, and we listen to Tito Mboweni, and it all sounds like a little bit up there. And yet we're the ones that are kind of trying to run businesses and keep our people employed and keep ourselves going. If you could take the key messages of the points you raised or that you shared with us and apply to small business people, the short question I have for you is, why does it matter to me? So what to me as a business person? How do I distill the key messages of what you're saying, or the key indicators that kind of are top of mind for you, that concern you as an economist? How does that translate to my world? How can I connect those dots, Mamelo?
So that's quite a big question, Andile, but I'll try my best to answer it. I think that the reality is that this year has been a very difficult year. I mean, the extent of the recession and the contraction in output that we're expecting is quite massive. If one looks at what's happened historically, I think the last time we experienced a contraction of this magnitude was in the 80s. So I think the point for me really, and to entrepreneurs out there, is that we need to think beyond the medium term. And I think it's very difficult. For most people, it's easy to get stuck into, oh my goodness, here's the recession, where are the opportunities? And when I was thinking about it, and I was looking at companies that started after the global financial crisis that are successful today, you look at Uber, that's one example, WhatsApp. And even if you go through history, you go through time, there's been a number of companies that have been started during a recession that are flourishing right now. So the short term to the medium term is not looking great for South Africa. We still expect very weak economic activity in the next 2 years. And that means that consumers are under a lot of strain. So our ability to purchase has been constrained. And this is because we've had to take pay cuts if you're still employed. But if you're not employed, you've lost that income. We've had the central bank trying to stimulate economic activity by cutting interest rates. One could make the argument that if you don't have access to credit, it doesn't really benefit you. But if you are a business looking for credit, that credit is somewhat cheaper. So there's a positive. And another positive that we've seen from this crisis is that these very low interest rates have given an opportunity for first-time home buyers. So that's where we're seeing, I think, the manifestation of interest rate cuts come through in terms of its ability to stimulate some economic growth. From a fiscal policy point of view, there's been some relief that has been provided to citizens in the country that are unemployed in terms of the monies that the president has announced. So that then keeps activity going in the economy. But the point really is we are expecting to experience very muted economic growth over the short term. But when I think about it is that we're not going to be here forever. And the point here is business, government, we need to work together to make sure beyond 2022 that we sort of see the sustained economic growth and we don't feel sorry for ourselves or actually pin this on government and say, government, you need to do something. How do we become innovative and creative around this time? A lot of us are working from home and using these platforms to engage in meetings and so on. So buildings are empty. Can we repurpose those buildings and think about how do we use this existing structure that was meant for people working in it and repurpose it and make it something that is workable for the future? So I think this crisis forces us to think really creatively about what we think the future is going to look like. And how do we get even more people involved in terms of creating jobs and incentivizing entrepreneurship?
Got you. Vuyo, let me move over to you. You took us through an exercise. You taught us about cognitive triangle, about how our thoughts affect our feelings, affect our behaviors. I'm interested in the letting go of the past. Man, we struggle with that, eh? I know I do, speaking for myself. And the exercise you took us through was almost proof of how much I struggle doing so. What kind of skills or tips can you give us in us being able to do that? Because 2020 was so impactful. It's so hard to let go and accept that what's happened has happened and move on and say, right now, I'm going to plan for a better life from here on out. Some of us have to accept or let go of failed businesses. We got to accept or let go of failing our people, our staff, people who've had to put out of work. We only have you for a few minutes here. How do I make this a part of my regular life? One of the guys has already asked the questions for your details, and I know that Ulisani is going to give them the details, Alfred, because he's saying, how do I get in touch with you? And I know why he wants to get in touch with you, because we feel like we need this. So how do we let go?
I think what's important to note, Wena Andile, is that letting go, as much as we often confuse what is a feeling and what is a belief or a way of letting go is a decision. Just like forgiveness is a decision. I may not feel like I want to forgive you, but I'm deciding to forgive you nevertheless, okay? And I think that's where the distinction starts, because often what happens is that we think because I'm still feeling the feeling, I'm not ready to forgive. So it's an egg and chicken situation. What should I do first? Is it letting go of the feeling or is it forgiving? And for me, it literally starts with the forgiving. You first have to accept that, yes, my business has failed. Because if you can accept that, and this is what we call radical acceptance, because there are good aspects of that business that had gone in. So you're Your business didn't fail because you were sitting passively and doing nothing. It were circumstances beyond your control. So when you allow yourself to reflect through a process towards a process of acceptance, it means you now suddenly can see all of those aspects, which when we're refusing to let go, we don't see. When we're refusing to let go, we only see the one part that has caused us the most pain. And we use that then to determine how we engage with the future. So it is, I know it perhaps is not what we want to hear, but it's as simple as making a decision to accept that I failed my business. Perhaps also look at it in terms of, have I really failed my staff? Because what was my intention? Was it something within my control? Was it something out of my control? Mamelo made a nice thing for me. It's not a nice thing, but she said it's not looking good for South Africa in the short term. And yes, it is not. But remember, we still exist. So we need to start thinking, what is in my control? What is not in my control? And it's the same with letting go. What is in my control? What is out of my control? Because most of the time we hold on because we think by holding on, we can change that which is not in our control. And it's already happened. So we need to let go and then forgive ourselves. It's literally, and forgiveness again is a cognitive process. You decide you're going to forgive and delay. And then I have to heal from what you've done to me. So then I have to forgive myself. And then I can start saying, okay, how do I heal? I need to start doing this. I need to grieve my losses. I need to make sure that my business starts coming up. What is within my control? I may not be able to access funding, but what can I access? My markets are still there. The previous clients are still there. How do I engage? How do I reconnect? So that when I come back, when things become better, I'm able to engage with them and I'm ready.
Okay. Ladies, unfortunately, that's where we're going to leave it due to time. You guys have been amazing. I really appreciate you giving us what a wonderful session on this Saturday. It's your personal time, so I appreciate it even more. But now you can go back and have a great Saturday. And we are not going to forget the things you've taught us this morning. We may still stay in touch. I know there's a lot of comments here of guys wanting to still stay in touch. I'll share your details accordingly with the teams that may do that. Thank you again to everyone for joining. Oh, there you go, guys. That's what we got from the economic front and also from a mental wellness perspective, hey? It's a decision, hey? Even if you don't feel like it, let go of the past. Don't forget it, but let go. And then you can start the process of healing. Beautiful. Next up is our guest entrepreneur for this final I'm an Entrepreneur Digital Summit for 2020. He is ready on the other side. He's ready to give us a sense of his story. Of course, I'm talking to Theo Baloyi, the man who started Batu. He's going to tell us a wonderful story, great story of his journey. And thereafter, we'll connect with him live all the way from his store opening in the Eastern Cape.
You didn't have to drive here.
The all-new Renault Triber, space for everything. Renault, most fuel-efficient brand in SA.
Hi everyone, my name is Theo Baloyi. I'm the founder of Africa's premium sneaker brand, Batu. We started our business in 2015 in a room in Alexandra with a vision to build a shoe brand that Africans can proudly affiliate with. While at it, reignite hope for our people and create sustainable jobs. I'm an accountant by profession, worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers for about 5 years, 2 years in South Africa, and 3 years in the Middle East. I believe that the entrepreneurial bug bit me when I was still doing my undergrad, become accounting sciences, when I used to sell perfumes door to door in Alexandra. I literally used to be that guy that used to hustle door to door in Alexandra Township, trying to make extra money through oil-based perfumes. And obviously, when I went into corporate, I got caught by, projects, deadlines, travels, and so forth. When I was traveling between South Africa and Dubai one night in 2015, I was stuck in Dubai airport connecting to Saudi Arabia for about 8 hours. I had an 8-hour layover in Dubai airport. And there was this one retail store in the duty-free section that had so much traffic. I just decided to go there and really see what's happening. What do they sell? So much, of traffic in the store. And when I got there, I was fortunate that the owner was there and I had a chat with him about his brand. He was a guy from France, based in the UAE, had a store in the airport duty-free section and a few stores as well, at Dubai Mall or within Dubai. And one thing that I took from the conversation, I spoke to him, I realized one thing about his brand. It had a true sense of, French community. It was a brand that resonated with the French community or people from France. And I was going and connecting to Saudi Arabia. I started asking myself, what are we doing, as Africans to tell our own stories? South Africa alone is known to be a rainbow nation. Africa is a very heritage continent. But what are we doing as Africans to really tell our stories, to build ecosystems, value chains, business model, services, products that the rest of the world can receive? I started asking myself about that. My reality at the time, having lived in Alexandra Township, was mainly different from my counterparts at corporate. So oftentimes when I went back home, coming from Dubai, driving into Alex, I could see that our brothers and sisters are suffering. A lot of them, are unemployed. A lot of them, don't have a lot of opportunities. And when I started talking to them, in the township and talking to our people, I realized that it's not so much about them being lazy or anything. It's just that a lot of them haven't gotten the opportunities that we have gotten. A lot of them haven't gotten the opportunities to further their studies. And I got to work. I didn't want to blame the government. I didn't want to blame anyone. I was like, look, how about that I start something, right, that can reignite hope? Not a lot, but just something very small that can reignite hope for my community. And while at it, create sustainable jobs. Well, I got to work. I'm a sneakerhead myself. End of 2015, I had such a valuable sneaker collection, but something was missing, an African brand in that collection. And I got to work. I did about 18 months of research and development, proof of concept, quality control, quality testing, getting the right partners involved, and obviously so that I can start my business. I used all my savings that I worked for in that 5 years term at PwC as a seed capital to start my business. And obviously, having to start the business, I had to choose between my job in the UAE, tax-free salary, 4 times what I was earning in South Africa, and this new business that I want to start, a sneaker business. But one thing that really pushed me to do so and to quit my job, tax-free salary, and I think I had an edge, a burning desire in me to really follow this dream of building a shoe brand that Africans can proudly affiliate with. I quit my job, relocated back home to start this dream. I did about 18 months of research, proof of concept, research and development, and many other things at the back end. One of the interesting findings from my research was that we've got about 7 continents in the world. For instance, other parts of the world, we can say South America, for instance, it's got about 2 big brands, Ipanema, Havanense that I can think of at the top of my head. If you look at the States, they've got Nike, started by Phil Knight, Converse, started by Chuck Taylor, and Under Armour, started by Kevin Plank, and many other European shoe brands and many other Italian brands, Italian footwear brands. I came to Africa. I couldn't find one footwear brand that can be benchmarked with those brands that I've just mentioned now. Benchmarked in terms of quality design or product design, quality, we can even take it further to CSI or even market share and revenue. Yet there's billions and billions of US dollars that leave this continent to go other part of the world. Yet we as Africans, we consume so much of sneakers. And it didn't make sense because Africa is known to be a very heritage country. Coming down to South Africa, we are known to be a rainbow nation. And for me, I knew that we are known for mostly the ugly stuff that happened in our country. Ipatu in South African township slang, from the days of Sophia Town in a language called Stotsita, I think now we call it slang, but back then it was Stotsita. It comes from then, back in the days of Sophiatown, in referral to a shoe. The beauty about Batu, the word Batu, it means shoe. And you don't necessarily have to speak in Ndebele, Tswana, Sotho, or anything to understand what it means in South African township landscape. It's known to be a shoe. In our Rainbow Nation, we've got different ways of eating, different ways of communicating, different ways of, dressing and talking to each other and so forth. Yet with Ipatu, any South African township from Umlazi to Gugulethu to Alexandra to Soweto to Tembisa, anywhere, when you go in there and say Ipatu, everyone knows what you're talking about. And this is a very beautiful untold South African story that really says a lot about our unity, about the Rainbow Nation that we are, something that really puts us together as South Africans. And for me, it didn't sit well that this beautiful untold South African story is not told to the world. So my vision was to build a shoe brand that Africans can proudly affiliate with and really tell a proudly South African story to the world. And coming from Alexandra, I thought, look, if I can really get this working together, get the mechanics working together, get the economics of the business put together, I can do that and not only do it to tell the story, but while doing it, I can reignite hope for my people. I can create sustainable jobs for my people. 5 years later, we employ about 135 people in our business, predominantly from Alexandra and many other townships as well. We have about 16 retail stores, in the country, brick and mortar. Obviously 17 with our online e-commerce, which is also one of the biggest stores for us and biggest revenue channel for us. We occupy about a 3,700 square meter, headquarters. And that is not, I don't think it's mainly because of us, but it's mainly because that growth is because people have been waiting for a sneaker brand that they can resonate with, number one. Number two, we have grown thus far because of the support that we've gotten over the years. Our brand speaks about walking your journey. Our tagline says walk your journey. We are a brand that wants to embrace everyone who's on a journey of greatness, a journey of impacting change, a journey of making a difference. And for me, I think with our brand promise is that if you are on a journey of being great, we want to be a shoe of choice for your journey. Ipatu, walk your journey. And that's who we are. I can take the whole day about our brand story, but beginning of 2020, we had plans to expand to about 7 retail stores. When we started the year, January 2020, we were on 5 retail stores, brick and mortar. We had plans to expand by 7 more stores, meaning that we would have ended the year with about 12 stores. However, that was not the case. The pandemic happened, COVID-19, and that was a global pandemic. A pandemic that affected or impacted a lot of sectors, the global economy, our economy, being in retail, and retail being one of the, I think, second best contributing sector in the GDP, stand to be corrected. We were heavily impacted because the first 6 weeks of lockdown, when the President Ramaphosa announced lockdown of the country, we had to close for 2 weeks. And that meant for 6 weeks, retail. And that meant that for 6 weeks, I had to close down our stores, or we had to close down our stores, and that meant loss of revenue. However, that gave us an opportunity to press a reset button about who we are as a brand, a reset button as how we do business, how we accommodate our clients, a reset button as to what tools can we plug into our business model to make us more efficient. And I think for me, I'm very humbled and pleased and grateful that I have survived the pandemic, in a sense that even when it closed stores 6 weeks, I didn't fire people. We didn't fire people in the business. We didn't retrench people in the business. We kept our people. And even it meant 6 weeks of them not working. We never did any salary cuts for the month of April. We paid people 100% salaries in our business. Mainly because I know what it feels like coming from Alexandra and not having a source of income. So going back to the core of our business about reigniting hope and creating sustainable jobs, that is the main reason why for us we had to compensate people at 100% for the month of April. However, going to May and June, we were heavily impacted as well. We had to cut down our salaries to 40, 30%. And still yet, we did not retrench people or fire people. And I'm grateful for that. But now we are back on 100%. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned, I think, during COVID-19 is that the world has forced us to be very innovative. There's a saying that says crisis breeds innovation. And then I think the pandemic has really taught us to really think about the future, to really think about the best ways of how to do business. For instance, for me, I had this expansion plan to build about 7 more stores. Yet, I think because everything has moved online, the pandemic has forced me to optimize my e-commerce platform, to reinvest in my e-commerce platform so that I can keep on generating. And even more so, it has given me an opportunity to integrate my brick and mortar stores with my e-commerce. I mean, now in a business, after post the pandemic, post lockdown, we have click and collect on our platform. We work on click and collect and many exciting things so that the customer experience, the brand promise that we give to people always remains the same. There's synergy between my brick and mortar and my e-commerce business. Whether you're buying online or whether you're buying in our store, you get the same customer experience and the same brand promise. That's one thing that I think for me, I learned during the pandemic, to also build businesses that the rest of the world can receive. Because oftentimes, and for the longest of times, Africa has always been at the receiving end of the latest technology, the latest app, the latest products, the latest brands, the latest services. The pandemics has really thought and pushed me to think of how do you build a business that the rest of the world can receive, a product that the rest of the world can receive. Because for far too long, Africa has always been at the receiving end of the best value chain, the best ecosystem, the best product, the best service. Now I had to think about how do I build a shoe brand that an Italian can look at and go like, I want to buy Batu, not because it's from Africa, but because their brand promise and what they stand for speaks to who I am as a client. And how does Batu make it easy for me to purchase or to support them? For me, that's one thing that the pandemic has taught me. I'm very grateful in my business because the first 2 years of my business, I did not do brick and mortar stores or retail. That meaning that I had a lot of offers at the time when I started, but I rejected them, mainly because I wanted to build a solid working capital that helped me expand the business the way we are doing it now, between OPEX and CAPEX projects, expanding our business, moving to a 3,700 square meter warehouse and being able to employ more people and being able to not fire people when the pandemic came, and when something comes where you're not generating revenue, to still be able to pay my salaries. Because the first 2 years of my business, I had a high turnover business with a very minimal, expenditure. And that has allowed me to build a working capital and to reinvest back in the business. And I think the advice that I want to give to a lot of entrepreneurs out there is that I know oftentimes when you start the business, you don't want to spend a lot. Like myself, I didn't want to spend a lot. I wanted to build a working capital, to build my value chain, to do the right thing in the business at the back end. Yet, one thing that I advise you is that in the midst of that, as much as you want to build a working capital, there's one thing that you should never compromise is your human capital, your HR. Because HR, and that's one of the things that I've learned as well during the pandemic, will support you in good times, in bad times. And human capital will support your strategy, will support your vision, from recruitment to talent acquisition, to growth of the business, to empowering people, to skills development. So you need to do it right and be able to recruit the right people in the business. So that is one avenue of business, I will tell you now, that you cannot afford to cheat, even at the primary stage of business. Because if you cheated, by the time you go through scale curve or growth curve, you'll have a lot of people issues that sometimes you can't even resolve because they're part of the culture. But for you to really build a culture that supports the growth of your business, you need to get your HR on point. And that's one thing that I've also learned during the pandemic because of the way we've done it from the beginning. I can talk the whole day. I really appreciate, this platform. And I think 2021 and beyond, before I even go to 2021, I mentioned we opened in 16 stores. Through God's grace, this year we plan to open about 7 stores. We actually opened about 11 12 stores that pushed our retail stores to about 16 stores this year. We also been able to enhance our customer experience in terms of sneaker customization that we plug into the business, and adding a value or bringing a value add in terms of how we deliver our brand and our customer experience at store level and also online. 2021, I'm quite humbled to be listed as one of the 100 most influential Africans in Africa. It's really great humbling as we speak for 2020. And that is part of my plan to really penetrate Africa. We've got a great appetite and huge appetite in Kenya, in East Africa as well. And then mostly a great, huge appetite in SADC region, which is the market that we want to tap and penetrate 2021 and beyond. So we will be penetrating 2021 and beyond, because at the core of our business is about building a shoe brand that Africans can proudly affiliate with, and a shoe brand that reignites hope and creates sustainable jobs. And then I believe that everyone in this world is on a journey of being great. And then we want to be a shoe of choice during that journey. And for us, we want to do that. And hence I said, it's about building businesses, ecosystems, value chains, products, services that the rest of the world can receive. Yes, we started in Alex, but we didn't say we're going to stay there. So 2021, we're penetrating SADC. Thank you guys for joining me and for being a part of this phenomenal series. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Baloyi.
Mr. Kumalo.
How are you, champion?
I'm great, and you, sir?
Oh man, did you find it like a quiet room at the store to talk to us? Is that what you did?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, it's quite busy at the store, and I respect this platform so much. So I had to get into the boardroom, center management.
No. Before you go, you a laptop around the store, and you must show us what's happening. But first, let's talk. Let's talk. Thank you so much for joining us, first of all. We've just been watching the words that you recorded for us. So much in there. I got tons of questions from everybody. I'm only going to ask one and allow the entrepreneurs that are on this platform to quiz you with the questions that are there. You spoke about the first 2 years of your business being the time when a lot of people made you offers, but you wanted to build some capital because you wanted to do certain things a certain way. Just give us more information on that. And how easy was it to resist the offers? So what did you have in mind? And what were some of the offers that were almost pressurizing you to go slightly different? And how were you able to still stay true to what you wanted to do and the way you wanted to do it?
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Before I answer that, I just want to greet everyone who's on the call. Thank you for taking your special time to join us here. Really appreciate it. So, like I've mentioned in the video, I've done about 18 months of research, proof of concept, research and development, and so forth. So one of the aspects that I really worked on hard was my financial modeling. Coming or having an accounting background, I was very concerned about, and obviously I've studied the retail sector, around how a lot of retail businesses grow and then how the structure looks like in terms of their management and their growth plan and so forth. I wanted to do it slightly differently because at the core of my vision is about, I wanted to build around township economics, for the township economy. And I wanted to do it in a way that it speaks to my vision, it speaks to my core. And therefore, the only way to do it was to build my seed capital or to use my savings as seed capital and try to maintain control in a sense that I wanted to build a value chain, because remember, the vision was to reignite hope and create sustainable jobs. So in our value chain and every model of our value chain, for me, I see each and every model as an opportunity to create employment. For an example, if I invest in my means of production, I'm contributing to the level of employment. The shoes come to my warehouse, I occupy the warehouse, right? I'm trying to give a practical example to that. I put the shoes on my floor in my warehouse that I pay for. I get to employ someone to pack the shoes. Then I get my own truck that I buy. Then it comes to my warehouse. Then I employ someone to drive the truck, right? And I get someone to put the shoes in the truck. Someone drives the truck to my own retail store and they drive the shoe there. When it gets to the store, I get to employ someone, at the store to sell the shoes. Then a customer comes. That is a big thing. When Theobalo walks into the store, I capture their data. Then I can remarket and so forth. But primarily, I knew that the nature of retail and business, especially when we've got partners involved at any stage of the business, they would want to do it differently. They would say, okay, cool, let us source and so forth. I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to have control of my value chain. And the best way to do it, especially having the plans to, in 3 years, at the time when I started, I was like, in 3 years, I want to do a huge expansion in my business. And retail is capital intensive. How do I get to build the capital to do it without getting funding? I don't have funding in my business. So the only way to do it was to really have a high turnover business, minimal cost. And what that allowed me is to build a healthy working capital, to move into a 3,700 square meter warehouse, to open 6 stores. Pandemic comes, I've got money that I don't borrow. It's my money to pay salaries. So that was the strategy. It's like I knew that 3 years later, or 5 years later, we'll have a pandemic in a way. That's why I didn't take any of us. Yeah.
That's good, because a lot of people would be like, yo, take the funding, bring in the partners, do all those things. Part of the reason that other people believe they're not successful is because they didn't have the partners, they didn't have the funding. So it's interesting that you were able to see that I want to control this process and I know what it means to have partners. I know that might lead to me kind of losing that control. That's brilliant, man. That's
absolutely. So basically it was in closing, it was I've done a study as to how do you build a business end-to-end value chain without getting funding, because that is, it's not often that we get that. There's always, investors and partners at the primary stage of business. So my study was like, is it really possible to build a business, without any sort of funding? And I wanted to test it. That's why I started my business. The first 2 years, I really did a high turnover business, minimal cost, to build the working capital and further expand 2 years from there.
Crazy, man. You're crazy. Okay, let's talk about the model now. Manufacturing locally, lots of job creation, outsourcing very little, doing it yourself. Most business people say these things to sound good,
Yeah.
Say these things because they're the cool things to say. In your story, it looks like it's quite personal for you that you're hiring our people, that you are controlling the process and not manufacturing in the Chinas, etc. You're minimizing a lot of that. It might be easy just to do it that way. Why is it so important to you?
It's actually tied to my DNA. Like I've said in the video, having lived in Alexandra, I know my reality, because when I was in corporate traveling, between South Africa and the UAE, I could see my reality was different as opposed to my, corporate counterparts at the time. So and then I've had a lot, like you said, for PR, I've had a lot of articles, a lot of leaders talk about impacting change in internships, but I really thought about it, doing it practically, and I often say this, that I left one job in the UAE, tax-free salary, 4 times what I was earning, but that job only provided for me and my family. I left it to start a business that provided for 135 more families, and for me, that was the vision. I thought about really doing small, and even the beginning of our business, we really started, I think, informally recruiting people. It was a matter of, hey, Spiwe, I've got 4 orders for the day, or I've got 20 orders for the day. I don't think I can get to pack all these boxes and do other parts of the business. Do you mind coming in and just helping me pack these boxes? The following day, we've got 40 orders, right? And then as Spiwe is not enough to do the 40 orders himself, then we've got a Tebogo to come on board. And then the next morning, we've got 80 orders in a day, and it's a matter of getting an Andrew to come on board, right? So it was very informally, and that shows that, it was connected to my DNA. Little did I know that end of the day, after 40 orders, I pay Spiwe 200 rand or whatever the case might be. I pay them end of the day, and then it started scaling up. Then now it started to do recruitment. So it was very, I think, informal in a way that I just wanted to build with my people. So it was a matter of, do I stay in corporate, contributing to models and infrastructure that have always been built for the longest of time, or do I just leave it, go back home and build with my people? So it was about building with my people more than anything.
Brilliant stuff. All right, I'm going to go to the questions that are coming through here now, and they're coming thick and fast. Let me go to Paul Petros wants to know, what would you say are the key factors an entrepreneur should focus on to facilitate growth in our country's context? So what are the key things should we be focusing on as entrepreneurs to make sure we get the economic growth we all talk about and we want?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I've also learned in the pandemic, Mr. Kumar, was that for the longest of time, Africa has always been at the receiving end, at the receiving end of the latest technology, the latest app, and basically a consumption hub for all of these great ideas and business models and infrastructure that was funded and started in Silicon Valley and so forth. And we are really quick to really jump on them and say, this is a great app. Did you see this? It was started in Silicon Valley. This is what it do. But what are we doing as Africans to really, really build businesses around our heritage that a French community can look at, an Italian can look at and go like, this was fun in Africa. Look at how it makes my life easier. I can really commercialize and build my business and run my business, and live my life. And this business comes from South Africa or from Nigeria or from Kenya, and I think mainly because of we often don't build, around our ecosystem, but also building for the world. So I think the key thing to do is to really build, businesses and build our ecosystem from, the means of production, and to how we commercialize our businesses. But yet the end picture should always be, the global, I think, economy, to say we need to build businesses that the rest of the world can receive, So I think that will be key, because once we do that, we're talking foreign investment, we're talking increasing the GDP and so forth, right? Because of now, we're not only talking Soweto and Cape Town and Guguletu, we're talking, New York. Someone in New York goes like, I wanna buy that product from Africa, and that's commercialization. And then money is coming, foreign investment and so forth, and then we can grow our economy. That's just my view.
Build stuff for the world, absolutely. Marlon Parker from our labs out in the Western Cape is saying, Theo, love your story, inspired by your journey. Here's an interesting question. How can we help you and Batu to become the leading sneaker brand in Africa? Now, there's an entrepreneur who wants to support another entrepreneur. I guess the first stop is you must buy some sneakers.
Absolutely. I think buying our sneakers either online, www.batu.co.za, or coming to one of our brick and mortar stores will be a great, contribution and a great way to help us go. But most importantly, I think it's not only about, the consumption thereof, but it's about the advocating. You need to advocate for not only Batu, but for, like I said, South African business to the world. In your travels, in your businesses, we should really be proud about speaking and consuming, African products and services, and I think that's the only way we should do it. Like having that sense of pride, the way Trevor Noah goes and flies the flag, all over the globe. We need to do it the same way with our businesses, with our products, with our services. And I think that's the best way to really, do it. Because I feel like sometimes, Mr. Kumalo, we as Africans, we are not very aggressive around pushing an African context or African narrative, African services. Yeah, we like sort of half class. We want Jerusalem to boom and wait for Cristiano Ronaldo to dance to it before we do a Jerusalem challenge. We don't say this is a Jerusalem challenge. We started in this country and then push it to the world and be aggressive to say, hey man, this is our challenge. And then the rest of the world can catch up to it. It's like, it almost has to start somewhere before the president says, oh, this is my challenge. You know what I'm saying? So we need to be aggressive in everything that we do. This very same tool that we're using, it needs to be an African tool, talking African narrative and African services and products and so forth. And we need to be aggressive. We are doing it, but I don't think we're aggressive enough.
Words from wise man and experienced man. More questions before I let you go. Nomibongo Mnyazi is asking, you have built more stores than you originally set out to thus far. How do you ensure that you and your staff do not get overwhelmed with this growth and ensure that you do not compromise on quality? Great question.
Very good question. So I think all the time, number one, for our business, we have, we try to have management meetings almost every week. We have something called the Reignite Hope. And the purpose for that is to really exactly answer that. It's called the Reignite Hope. So our core, our reignite hope meeting. So our core says, we want to reignite hope for our people and create sustainable jobs. So every week we have reignite hope meetings, and the purpose for that, the objective for that is for the team not to sort of get overwhelmed in different parts of the business, from means of production to how we package, how we distribute, how we, offer our brand promise and so forth. So it's sort of like reinforcing who we are about, and then, trying to make sure that the team is always focused on the right thing, and not only with our team internally, but with our stakeholders, to try to make sure that in as much as we're increasing, our order and our manufacturing capacity, we need to adhere to the same standard, even better if possible, then a same level of quality and so forth. So it's something that I'm very, very, passionate about, and I'm really, really careful about, to say, as we're growing, we don't get overwhelmed. From the smallest things that we try to deliver our brand promise from when you walk in our store, when you call our office, when you walk into our warehouse and so forth, we make sure that we give you that same customer experience that we've always had.
Theo, I can't thank you more. I need you to pick up the laptop though, because I gotta see the store. We can't let you go.
Jeez, Mr. Kumal, I need to walk because I'm at the boardroom and the store is like, a few minutes away from here.
Okay, then it won't work. If it's fine, it won't work. Let's just end it right now. Thank you so much, my brother. From the bottom of my heart, I want to tell you something. There's a lot of people that are popular for being popular. We know them because we know them. And there's people that we should know because they got something important to teach us. And you, my friend, you matter. I'm
humbled, my brother.
Inspiration, not because you are popular for being popular, because you are building something we can touch, feel, and wear, and walk our own journeys in them, as you've convinced us to see. So I really wish you the best. I'm so proud of you. I don't have the words to express how important you are to this country. For me, entrepreneurs that look like me, that come from the communities I come from, are more important than any CEO of a listed company or any politicians of a political party, because you showed me that it's possible. And I can tell you now, there are thousands, if not millions, of young Black people across this continent, across the world, who look to your story and say, I too can do it, because someone who looks like me, who grew up like me, was able to do it. So I wish you all the best, my brother. God bless you.
I'm humbled, my brother. It means a lot coming from you. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you to everyone who logged into this call. I appreciate it.
All right, take care, man.
Thanks, bye.
Yes, cheers. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. How cool was that, eh? Absolutely brilliant story. It's so important to see real proof points of people really doing things. And Theo's that guy. Please do follow his business and him on social platforms. He's a great person to follow on Instagram. He's always looking snazzy. He's always got his shoes. He's always telling you what's happening in the business. Makes you want to buy more and more of his sneakers, as we all should. What a great story it is. And hopefully it's left you with some inspiration from somebody who's very positive about the African story, who's very positive about pushing forward our own creative and our own stories and our own brands out into the world. And that's the story we're all trying to push, even here at I'm an Entrepreneur. On the other side of this short break, we're going to go straight into Lita Kari from Three Stick Men, who's captured the conversations of today as a gift to you and I.
Hi there, Andile. Lita Kari from Three Stick Men. I'm going to share with you a visual summary of what we've just gone through in the last 2 hours. So allow me a moment to share my screen, and then you'll see the picture in front of you, and we can go through that very quickly. So as the presenters have been talking, I have been capturing a picture really to kind of summarize the main insights, and I want to take you through that. So Musa spoke about, we all have a plan until we get hit in the face. He spoke about the economic reconstruction and development plan, the 3 steps there: engage and preserve, recovery and reform, and reconstruct and reform. What is our plan? We aren't hopeless. It's Africa rising. We've got lots of opportunities there. He also spoke about the fact that a sharp turn is only dangerous if you forget to turn. And he spoke about technology, passive technology, generative technology, and intuitive technology. And what I thought was really interesting was the Kubler-Ross change curve. Where are you on this change curve? Are you still in shock? Are you in denial? Are you frustrated? Are you depressed? Or are you already starting to experiment and to see how you can integrate? I think the important thing here is think about those behaviors that's going to move us forward: the self-leadership, the embracing the transformation, and the tech literacy, which I think was really important. And then Mamela spoke to us about the economic overview. She spoke about the fact that we're seeing the impact in a current account, capital account, domestic supply, and demand shock. Our industry turnover has declined, but we are slowly recovering. The vaccine hopefully is coming, but we have to watch out for that second wave. There's been an impact on the labor market borne mostly by contract workers. Consumers remain pessimistic. Business confidence is low. Inflation hopefully will stay at about 4.5%, but that there are opportunities. There's interest rates that have been cut aggressively, new interest into the property market. And she spoke about very particular opportunities: agro processing, manufacturing, renewable energy, construction, retail, online, and finance. So there is opportunities out there for us. And then we went into healing with Vuyo. Vuyo speaking about the fact that healing is really a process of restoring our health. Time doesn't heal, and I thought that was really important. What do we do with our time? She spoke about the fact that we need to acknowledge the loss. We need to let go of some of those opportunities that we might not have taken. And we need to face the trauma. And trauma really is experiences that the brain doesn't know how to process. And the process that she took us through is: be who you are, manage your feelings and manage your thoughts, switch off that anxiety, let go of the past, and forgive ourselves. And I particularly liked that quote by Bianca saying, be brave enough to heal yourself, even if it hurts. We're not helpless. Healing does take work. Some of the insight: letting go of the past is a decision. Even if you don't feel like it, it's always a decision. Accept the reality and take the action about things that you can control. And then Theo shared with us his stories around Batu, creating a true sense of community. What I really liked about this is how does Africa, how do we tell our own story? We don't always have to be at the receiving end. What stood out for me around his story is he did a lot of research. There was a lot of background detail that he had to do around proof of concept. It was deliberate, it was intentional. He used the lockdown and the pandemic to really reset, and using this time to rethink the business. What I liked about what he said is, we started in Alex, but we can go anywhere. Crisis breeds innovation, and never compromise on your human capital. They kept on paying salaries and they didn't retrench anyone during the pandemic. And then lastly, my job in corporate, he said, only supported my own family. My business supports many families. So a really, truly uplifting story over there. We'll be sharing this graphic with you, so look out for that in your inboxes. And Delia, that's the visual summary. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Lita Karim. Wow, that was absolutely. Anybody out there in poll world? All right, while the poll is on its way, let me tell you, this is our final one for the year. Of course, we're back in the new year with a brand new plan for 2021. If you're joining us via WhatsApp, please send us your email address so that you can get all of the notes, including Lita Kari's little gift that she's given us with the graphics for the session. For those guys who logged in through Zoom, you'll be getting an emailer with asking you essentially to give us some feedback. So please do that for us. I am really, really honored to have been able to do this with you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure in the past few years to be able to serve you. We hope to do the same thing in 2021. So please make sure you join us then. Otherwise, thank you once again. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Saturday. Cheers and goodbye.
Thank you for joining us at the I'm an Entrepreneur Digital Summit in association with FNB and these partners.
We can help you pay staff without using cash, send money by e-wallet or pay using EFT payments with the FNB app or online banking for business. FNB, how can we help you?